Uh, Listen to all those birdies just chirping and calling out to each other. You know what it sounds like? Sounds like spring. And yes, spring is almost here. I think we got 12 more calendar days until the official equinox comes around. But nature and the world kind of just like does its own thing when it comes to changing seasons. So if it's starting a bit early, it's starting a bit early. Like this weekend, we had like 70, almost 80 degrees yesterday. And that was after having record breaking freezing temperatures this winter. Whew, what a ride this winter was. And it's funny because winter is typically a season for like hibernating, slowing down, taking it easy, finding ease and peace, because winter is about surviving something that's harsh and challenging. So to survive a harsh and challenging winter by doing the exact opposite, too, mind you. For me, it was being and doing multiple things. It was hosting an art residency for 6 weeks. It was being in class 2 times a week, and it was also working. Juggling a lot of those things, plus some housing related changes that some were great and favorable, others left me with no hot water. Anyways, it was interesting that after we moved out of our residency space, we moved in January 16th and we moved out February 28th, literally like the last day of almost like the cold season. And this past week, which was the first week of March, I think it was Tuesday. So Saturday we moved out. Sunday I moved stuff around my apartment, redid it because I had to do some spring cleaning because I got my floors redone because of water damage. Woot woot. And then Monday I had to work a full day. Come Tuesday, my body literally decided to just say no more. I thought I was going to go to class. I did my reading for class, and it was a really interesting reading. But I just did not make it. I listened to my body, and it was like, we just need to rest. Like, we've been on the go this whole season, which is typically not normal for me. It's, again, winter is your time to chill and relax, but to have been active and running at a higher level of adrenaline and stress, I think that biochemically the body recognized that in order to prepare for the new season, it was going to have to take a break and take a chill moment. And I think, I've talked about it often, but the value and the importance of slowness, especially in today's world, which is consistently asking us to pick up the pace. Everything is designed to be more faster and more efficient, because speed and efficiency lead into they're aspects of production, right? If I can produce things faster, if I can produce them more efficient, then I should do that, because at the end of the day, that'll make me more money or income or capital, whatever. So after going full sprint for 6 weeks, after having probably higher amounts of cortisol in my body than I've had in a long time, I think that when the body recognized that it was in a place to be secure and safe and calm, it decided it's time to rest. It's time to take a breather. And I think that it really struck me how, even though I had these plans and ideas, like, oh, I'm gonna go to class, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, like, the body made the decision for me. And I'm not even gonna like, isn't it interesting I even phrase it like that? I've been reading this book called The Birth of Pleasure by Dr. Carol Gilligan, and it's a really fantastic book about it really utilizes the myth of Psyche and Cupid as a way to create a new roadmap of love outside of like the patriarchal love story, which is a tragic story, which is typically rooted in the Oedipus mythology. That the son is destined to kill the father, and have incest with the mother. Like that's the main story myth that we have been, like, as in Western society, been holding on to. So the author is positing the myth of Psyche and Eros as a way of counteracting the patriarchal love story. But a lot of what the book focuses on is association and dissociation. At what point do young girls and young boys lose their voice and forego their voice, or gain a voice and forego relationships? When do we begin to silence ourselves and question what we know in order to survive in the patriarchal society? And it comes with a lot of association and dissociation. The book talked a bit about Anne Frank's diary, which I definitely want to read now, and how there's 3 different versions of that. If you didn't know, there's the original version that she wrote, and then there's the version that she edited, and then there's the version that her father edited. So there's 3 different versions of this classic novel that exist out there. And the author, Carol Gilligan, talks about how we, especially in writing, we can dissociate ourselves in order to like to navigate essentially something that might be contradictory or confusing or conflicting. So in that statement of like, my body decided it was resting, like that was me presenting a little bit of dissociation, like, well, my body did this, but I wanted to do this, where it's like, no, the goal, I think, of maturing in our Western society as a complete human being is trying to reassociate ourselves and trying to reconnect with those youthful feelings that we once had. The fact that, like, the author argues that young boys start to lose their sense of individuality and self around 5 or 6 when they start joining the boys club, where it becomes a narrative of good boys versus bad boys, cops and robbers, things like that. That split and that divide sometimes comes from like cultural myths, cowboys, police. Our world is built around you're good, you're bad, and that split forces boys to have to choose to either be good or bad. And then fathers and sometimes mothers will reinforce those things, and it's a cycle, because then at some point the fathers start to recognize, like, am I doing the same thing to my son that my father did to me? And the answer typically is yes. And that is how patriarchy continues to have a grip on us. And I think it was also good that the author laid out a framework and a groundwork for like what she meant when she was saying patriarchy, because, you know, that is such a common trendy word. It's a buzzword. You say patriarchy, anything is like, oh yeah, that's a patriarchy. But like, what exactly is patriarchy? And the author made it simple that I think it has roots in like religion first, that like it relates to like the patriarch or like a priestly figure, but essentially means that a father or a father figure is at the ruling head, and that they are the person who makes the laws. So when you think about that, like we have been we've been ruled like fathers are ruling us. And fathers' rules affect the mother, because the mother has to do what the father says if she wants to survive and thrive in the society. So a mother might feel some type of way about something, but she might silence herself in order to not challenge the father's law and the father's will. And that silencing of the mother can be picked up in the child. And the child then is very confused why they might know a thing, but then their mother is telling them something that is counter to what they know. So they begin this process of dissociating. And that is what happens so frequently in our world, is a grand dissociation. That is how our systems thrive, because we are dissociated from our real selves. It's the fact that women are conditioned to silence themselves and play the role and play the part in order to survive. And that's also why men are conditioned to numb themselves in order to stick within the guise of manhood and masculinity. But we come to realize like both of those are barriers to us, prevent us being our true selves. And true self is a very like vague and open-ended statement, but at the same time it's also very real and rooted, because like we could be so different if we didn't have these cultural scripts conditioning us from the beginning of time, from times before us, that we're born into we're not born in a vacuum, you know? We're born where history already exists. We're born where legacies are attached to our bodies, whether they're good legacies or not, whether that comes from, you know, the sex that we're born as, the race that we're born as, what part of the world we're born as, all things out of our control, right? So we got to learn how to reassociate with ourselves again. How do we come back to who we were? How do we take account for the splits within our bodies and find the different selves and bring them all together and embrace them? You know, it's not necessarily a matter of like, you don't want to have to criticize an aspect of yourself, because that part of you is real and that part of you is true. So we got to keep that thing close. We got to hold tight to it. We can question it. We can examine and observe it. But at some point, we have to acknowledge that, oh, this is us. And I'm past the point of not, like, if I want to be a complete being, I have to be able to accept all sides of myself. And that can be scary, and that can be intimidating. And my questioning is, how much of this can you do alone? You know? Can you identify selves that have been put away in your daily routine and rhythm? Or does it require some outside or external force that can begin the journey? You know, a lot of times I think in our society, that comes from going into therapy. When you go into therapy, you are encouraged by an external source, i.e. a therapist, to begin to navigate and examine things that you may not have considered, but they know like some tips and tricks to guide you along the path. So there's that. Another thing that the book talked about was how oftentimes it's children that in can inspire that interrogation of what we may have lost. When you get to see a child do the things that they do, it reminds you of who you used to be as a child, and then it make you think about all the things that you don't remember as a child. Like, I went out to dinner with my family on Friday, and within the dinner, my sister was talking about like some stuff that happened to her in middle school, and I made a comment like, I barely remember what happened to me in middle school. Like, I think I can trace back my feeling of really dissociating, I think, to that time period, which is very interesting because, like, the book talked about how young boys around like 5 to 6 is typically when boys begin to dissociate, and girls associate around 11 to 12 in adolescent years. It's just a really interesting observation that, for me, I feel like I can remember most things about elementary school, but when it comes to middle school, that feels like a blank era, because I can remember like wanting to maybe be a different self or wanting to create a different self. Like, there were so many different things. Yeah, so many different things happened in middle school that led to that. But it was my sister talking about it that made me go, huh, I wonder what else in middle school, like, I might have glanced over or glossed over or didn't look at. But I also can remember that for a long period of time in my life, ever since I've worked, I've worked with children in some capacity, whether it's directly, like being a YMCA or after school counselor, or indirectly, like having pediatric patients or taking pictures in the photo studio. So I've always worked and been in proximity to children to some degree. And I wonder if that is why I might have an easier way of associating with the aspects of myself than maybe some people. Because if children are lenses into our world, then maybe I've had a chance to just view my world a little bit more, like, easily. I don't know. But yeah, it is hard and risky to learn about who you used to be. Not necessarily who you want to become, but who you used to be. Because who you want to become is going to inevitably be based on who you used to be. So if you want to move forward, you got to be able to look back and see who you are. And I think that, like, I think that's why love is so important. I know, it's a love talk. Because a real love, to be embraced and accepted and appreciated for who you are as all of you. Not just that you're fulfilling a role or a place or a position, but all of you. To know that you can take the risk and learn about yourself, discover something that might be a little bit intimidating or scary or ugly to you, you might be able to hold tighter to it when you have somebody that you love say, I see this and I welcome it. And then with that power and that support and that courage, it might further push you along the path of knowing even more of yourself. Vulnerability that gets rewarded leads to more vulnerability. And vulnerability can, open so many doors for us. So maybe we don't have to do this thing alone. And maybe we shouldn't. Let's learn ourselves with each other.